I've been doing a weekly video showing you the different crops that I'm growing in my garden. Recently I've really focused on showing you ancient Native American food crops, but I'm also growing a lot of different ancient grains from all over the world. I've gotten comments of people wanting me to show you the different ancient grains, so in this video I'll do a quick overview of the different kinds of grains that I'm growing. Some of them are ready to harvest now, some of them are close to being harvested, and some have a ways to go. So let's go through the different ancient grains that I'm growing in the garden. Now this first grain that I'm showing you is a variety of rice. Most people think of rice as needing to be flooded, but there's several varieties that are dryland. And this is a dryland variety that comes from Russia. I'll put the variety and where I get these seeds. And it's new to me. I've never grown rice before, and I'm really curious to see if I can get some rice out of this. It requires water, so I do water it the same as I do corn, but it does not require flooding. So we'll see if we can get any rice out of this crop. Now these seed packs that I start with are just a few ounces, so in the first year I'm just working on increasing my seed production, and next year I'm actually going to try to grow enough to eat. It'll be interesting if we can actually grow rice in a dryland garden. Here's a variety of barley that I'm growing. This comes out of India and it has a spring growth pattern. It's a 2-row naked barley, so it's not as productive as the 6-row barleys, but it's still putting out a lot of seeds, so I think I'll get a pretty good crop of this barley this year. Now the next grain that I'm growing is oats. This variety is a Hulless spring oat. You can plant it in the spring and the seeds are easier to clean than the standard oats. Now oats are interesting because they're the highest in protein and lowest in carbohydrates of all cereal grains. I got a pretty good crop, so I'll be able to grow a lot of oats next year, and I'll also try to eat these either rolled, steel cut, and cooked. So a good crop, easy to grow, very productive. Now here I'm growing a variety of wheat called Spelt. This is a spring Dinkel spelt, and these spring varieties are pretty uncommon. Most of these spelts are winter varieties, and so I'm really interested in growing this out and see if I can grow a lot more. I like the idea of being able to plant grains in the spring instead of doing it over winter. It's less of a time commitment, and it seems to be really productive for having a shorter growing season. You might see down here I have some other plants. These are weeds. Last year I grew tobacco, some Native American varieties of tobacco, and I did not plant those this year, but they're popping up everywhere. So tobacco is actually a weed. If you plant it and it comes up, you can either pull it or just let it grow. Here's a nice thick crop. It almost looks like corn, but it's actually a variety of sorghum known as white Milo, and it's considered a staple food in Africa. The seeds are gluten-free. They can be ground into meal or flour, and they're used in baking. And they can also be popped like popcorn. The birds love eating this, so I'm going to see if I can save some of the seeds before the birds get them. Here's an incredibly productive crop. These plants are over 6 feet tall with huge seed heads. This is quinoa. This variety is called Redhead Quinoa. It was developed here in Oregon. But quinoa has been grown in South America for thousands of years, and the seeds are gluten-free, so they've become more popular recently with the health craze. And yeah, this is doing really good. Now these leaves look similar to lamb's quarter. These are closely related to lamb's quarter and will crossbreed, so you got to be careful when you're trying to save seeds, but a very productive crop. Here I'm growing a crop of the world's smallest grain. This is called Teff. I have white Teff and brown Teff. This is grown extensively in Ethiopia, and these seeds are tiny, but they can be harvested and ground into flour, made into a sourdough flatbread, or brewed for beer. They're also cooked like oatmeal, and the texture is very similar to wheat. So it's interesting growing such a tiny little grain, and I can't wait to harvest it, see how it does. Teff. Here's another variety of barley that I'm growing. This is called Sardinian Barley. It comes from Italy, and this is not a specific variety, but a name given to the land race of barley that comes from the region. Here's a crop with a little white flower and seeds that are all ready to be harvested. This is not a grass, so it's not a true grain. This is buckwheat, which is closer to the rhubarb or sorrel family, and it's one of the first to be harvested, and it's a really big seed and can be ground into a flour. This looks like it's going to be a really productive crop of chia. Chia was grown by the Aztecs in South America, and it's a good food crop. I just got these seeds out of the bulk food section at the grocery store, and they grow great, so I think I'm going to grow a lot of chia seeds here. Here's a plant with little tiny yellow flowers, and a lot of seeds are starting to develop. This is in the mustard family. It's called false flax. It's been cultivated in Europe since the Bronze Age. The seeds are 40% oil, and it's high in omega-3 fatty acids, so definitely a promising new crop in my garden. Here's a plant that I featured in previous videos, but not for the edible seeds. I've featured it more for the long fibers. This is flax. This variety is known as Marilyn, named after the long fibers which resemble Marilyn Monroe's hair, and I make my primitive bowstrings out of this plant, but you can also harvest and eat the seeds as well. Here I'm growing 3 ancient varieties of wheat. I have Kumut, Emmer, and Einkorn. I'm going to harvest these seeds and make bread out of them. I've been growing these ancient varieties for a long time, and especially Einkorn. When I became interested in Ötzi the Iceman, the 5,000-year-old frozen ice mummy, they cut his stomach open and they found out that his last meal included a diet of einkorn. So I've been growing the ancient variety of wheat, and it's really interesting to grow these crops that have been grown for thousands of years. Here I'm growing a crop of millet. Now millet's a catch-all name for several different species of grass. There's Pearl, Japanese, Hell's Canyon, and Proso. Here I'm growing white Proso millet, which has some of the best flavor. Millet's grown around the world for food, especially in India. Here in the US it's considered more bird food, but you can also harvest the seeds, which I'm going to do this year. This is a beautiful plant that's very vigorous and grows a lot of seeds. This is amaranth. This variety is called Hopi dye amaranth, and I've been growing this for several years and get a ton of seed off of this. So we're going to collect all this amaranth seed and make bread out of it. And a lot of this is volunteer. I didn't plant any of this last year. It's just seed that fell to the ground and grew on its own. So it could become weedy, but I'm glad that it's growing here so I can harvest it. The final crop that I'm going to talk about is cereal rye. I planted my whole garden in this last winter and let it grow. It outcompetes most weeds, and then I can work it into the soil as a green manure. It traps nitrogen and really improves soil quality. But I let some of it mature so I could harvest the seeds. My wife is incredibly talented at making bread. We're going to harvest these seeds, grind them into flour, make our own sourdough culture, and then bake bread. So stay tuned. You'll see garden to table experience where my wife will show you how to make bread from these grains that we've grown in our garden.